Good morning, everybody. Um, Today's kind of a weird and bit difficult day for me. It's June 13th, 2026, which really marks 8 years to the date that I lost my youngest son, Agent Michael Moore, in a tragic house fire. Now, I mention that because I just want to let people know I can truly empathize with the loss of a son. And every year, I really try to just take time and spend that time with God. I have my coffee. I try not to schedule anything on this day and just kind of reflect a little bit. It's just kind of like a Sabbath day, a personal Sabbath day for me to just kind of remember my son, honor him, and reflect on my life and my, you know, living in a purpose or trying to be a catalyst for change in his honor. And I was sitting this morning drinking my coffee. Something really hit my spirit, heavy. I couldn't really shake it, and it leads me down this road to this double tragedy involving Karmelo Anthony and Austin Metcalf. First, let me say this: my heart goes out to both families. Pain does not pick a side. Loss doesn't pick a side. Two families are broken right now, and nothing about that is okay. But what I want to talk about is how do we keep getting here? How do we keep getting in these situations? Because things like this just does not happen out of nowhere. They build, they sit under the surface, and the real issues behind things like this are hate, bigotry, racism, and the mindset that keeps getting passed down and ignored until it explodes. And And we all know what happens when we let things fester and sit and boil over without ever really addressing the problem. And I think in America, that is literally one of our biggest flaws. And before we try to make this situation simple, it's not. I'm not here to argue any legal details. I'm not a lawyer. But I am a father, and I know this much. Nobody should be putting their hands on anybody. Nobody should be harassing anybody. But we also cannot pretend like history doesn't matter. We know this country has a documented pattern of treating black kids differently, especially black boys. That is not emotion, that is fact. I know because I was a black boy. And we always want to ignore history when we know history actually sets up patterns or helps us acknowledge patterns that affects the present that dictates our future. Hands down. Okay? The U.S. Department of Education has straight up said that the discipline in schools disproportionately falls on black students, and the patterns show up as early as preschool and continues across the whole system. And it gets worse. Black students make up a smaller proportion of population, but account for almost 40% of suspensions nationwide. That's crazy to me. That's crazy to me that we you know somehow still end up in a higher percentile of disciplinary actions, although we make up a smaller portion of the population. That is wild. So when I say they're treated differently, that's not a feeling, it's just data. And again, you can look that up on the U.S. Department of Education if they haven't scrubbed it yet. Now, let me bring it home. My oldest son just graduated a predominantly white school, and I'm going to be real. Their experience was really not that good from ninth, 10th to 11th grade. He got called the N word. They called him a monkey. I mean, they badgered him. I mean, we all been to high school, but being one of the only black kids at high school, you know, who kind of walks to his own beat, he really did endure a lot of racial slurs, and you could see that his confidence was a little bit affected. And basically anything you can think of. Um, And sadly, that's not rare either. About 1 in 5 students in our country get bullied, and a significant portion of that is tied to race or identity. So, like, identity politics start as early as junior high. So yeah, this isn't just kids being kids. This is something deeper. And every time my son would defend himself, he was the one getting in trouble. And let's face it, that tracks too. Research shows black students are punished more harshly than others, even for the same behavior. And oh boy, it was literally exactly, he was matching their enemy as everybody wanted to talk about proportionality. He was being very proportional to some of the energy, and sometimes probably even nicer than I would have. So when I say he was treated differently, I'm not guessing. I'm watching him. I live inside something that's already been proven. And as a father, I was pretty angry. I wanted to pull him out like immediately. But my son said something I will never forget. He said, "Dad, I'm going to have to deal with this my whole life. I might as well learn now." He's like, people are going to hate me just because of who I am, you know, and I can't run from it. So I don't want to start running now. And that hit me. That really hit me. Um, and I kind of, and there was also a fear that hit me. But let me be real. That kind of thinking doesn't come from nowhere. That comes from understanding the world that we live in. Because even outside of school, the same patterns show up. We live in a country where data has shown black people were stopped, searched, handled by the police at a much higher rate in some places and several times more likely than white individuals. And once you're in the system, it doesn't get better. Black Americans are about 13% of the population, but make up 37% of people in prison. And even the federal sentencing, even in federal sentencing, black men receive longer sentences on average than white men for similar crimes. Case in point, Carmelo Anthony. There were two other incidents similar to the Carmelo Anthony's that couldn't even be that were a lot more aggressive. Where I think one white kid stabbed a Hispanic kid and he got 10 years, like intentionally premeditated to do that. So I mean, just goes to show you right there. But I'm not going to go too far on that horse. Um, but when I say that, like I fear for my son, I wasn't being paranoid because I'm like it's an awareness. I had to have my son in the house by 8 p.m. Not because I didn't trust him, but because I know how fast situation can turn. One argument, one misunderstanding, one person feeling disrespected, and now your child is either a headline or gone. Meanwhile, the other kids get to live freely and make mistakes and stay out late. That freedom is not equal. After already losing one son, carrying the fear of losing another, that is not something you want to feel every day. And my son would be mad with me at times because I'm like, dude, you gotta be in here. Hey, look, man, it's getting dark. Like, yo, you can't be walking around the neighborhood at this time of night. Oh, you gotta, you can't wear that hoodie. Um, and oh man, you wear jeans and a collar shirt, and the man hates jeans and collar shirts. He loves the sweatsuits and all that stuff. I'm just like, please don't put the hoodie up because you might get shot. There's just all these things. Like he can't even be in his own fashion or style because I'm worried about what's going to happen because of the community that we live in. Like that sucks. While everybody else is out, you see everybody riding their little electric bikes. They're walking, having a good time, playing, talking, and you know that the same consequences are not, or the same worries they don't have to worry about, but I do, and that fear is real. Um, Now, And I know I said a lot of crazy bad things, but let's talk about some of the good things. Um, I thank God we have good people around us, especially like our church community and our friends and the people that I work with are really true allies who actually listen and actually take time to understand uh, our cultural differences and in our journeys that we walk without turning a blind eye. So I'm very 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 grateful for that. Um, but not everybody has that, and that's where situations like this become a tragedy because when there's no accountability, no empathy, no intervention early, things escalate. If somebody steps in early, if somebody checks the behavior early, if somebody says this isn't okay early, then maybe both those young men would still be here. And that's the truth. My mom always told me to love people no matter who they are. I never came from a place of hate. You can go down my Facebook page, my TikTok, see my friends. I have a literally rainbow coalition of people I deal with, from multicultural to multinational to international. Um, you know, you're not just going to see me with the same group of people, because I just wasn't raised that way. And diversity of thought, diversity of culture is one of the biggest learning experiences you can have. So if you teach your children early, then we don't get a Carmelo Anthony and an Austin Metcalf because they would have been shaking hands and enjoying the game opposed to turning into the scuffle that led to a death. Um, we keep letting hate and ego run situations until it's too late. Let me be clear. I teach my kids this: don't go out there starting nothing. Don't go out there starting something with anybody. Don't start anything because you don't know how that person is willing to finish it. Please don't go out starting trouble or trying to jump on people because you don't know what people are capable of. And when people are scared, they're going to react in fear. You will get shot, stabbed, killed, beat. You just don't know. Don't start stuff with people. That is like the golden rule. Um, it's like, please just let people be. And you know, if I go out to the Walmart and I get in an argument with a guy and he feels threatened, he pulls out a gun and shoots me. I put myself in that situation because I shouldn't be out antagonizing people under any circumstance. And I hate to say that, and that's harsh, but that is the harsh reality that we live in. And if I'm 200 pounds, I'm 5'8". I work out. I'm not built like the Rock or anything, but I'm not a small guy. You know, and I go to another guy who's probably a buck 30, 60 years old, and I'm trying to, I'm antagonizing him, and he pulls, and I look threatening, pulls out on me. That's kind of on me, you know. So we have to just really be careful because we don't know how people are going to react. And I teach my kids that, please don't be the bully, you know. And as a matter of fact, if my kids ever went out and bullied somebody and put their hands on somebody, disrespected somebody, I'm not going to be the one on the news defending them because accountability goes both ways. You know, my sons and my daughters, they out there, and they just started something with somebody, and tried to attack somebody, and they get laid out. Um, as sad as it might be on my end, I'm going to have to advocate for the victim. I'm going to be like, no, my kids know better. They shouldn't have been doing that to begin with. And that they wouldn't have been doing that, they would have still been here. And as much as I'm going to miss them, as much as I love them, every action has a reaction. And that is something that they brought on themselves. I know that sounds callous and cold, but that is raw. That is true. You know, so that's why I tell my children who are no longer children, um, don't go out there starting and don't be in the middle of anything. Okay, because you still have to take accountability for the actions that we play in these situations. And let's just on another note, let's stop pretending that the system treats everybody the same. It doesn't. They can't do what their counterparts can do. We know this in the black community. We can't do what our vanilla friends do. You know, they can do everything their chocolate friends do, but we can't do anything that the vanilla people do because they are going to have a different result. That is just hands down, that is systematic. We just know that. So accountability for us looks different than accountability for them, you know? And in the reality in that in that reality shapes how black families raise their kids with rules, fear, awareness, and let's face it, constant prayer. Okay, I come from a praying moms. Okay, I got praying moms, praying aunts, praying wives, praying grandfather, praying fathers. You know, like man, you know, we are all always constantly praying. You know, and putting in work too, because you know faith without works is dead. But that's why we have, and that's why they like, oh, I'm just praying for them because you know how this world is. Because there's a fear, you know, and an awareness, and you know, like I know they didn't took the term woke from us, um, but woke was meant to be. It was a statement of saying to be aware is to be alive, you know, not for all this cartoon stuff that they're making out to be now. But that's another topic. Somebody once said to me, if Black Americans stop committing crimes for 1 year, the whole narrative will fall apart. Maybe, but we also have to be honest. We're dealing with deeper issues: poverty, lack of resources, mental health struggles, generational trauma, unequal schools. Even funding shows schools serving fewer black and brown students often receive more money per student on average. So the system isn't starting people in the same place that matters. And that matters at the end of the day. We got to be smarter about how we move, not scared, but aware, because every space is not safe, every environment is not equal, and the whole situation, period, is really heartbreaking. Two young lives, two families destroyed, and a country still dealing with the same problems it's been dealing with for generations. We just got to do better. We have to. I don't want to get too much off topic, but we do talk about poverty. We do talk about lack of resources. We talk about inequality. I'll, you know, I spent a lot of time in the library, um, and I was doing a little research. And in my research, I found that you can put every, hear me out, every person in this world with their families in Africa and give every family 2 acres of land. Uh, and not only that, you will still have enough land in Africa to feed everyone in the world. I want to say that again. Every person in the world can fit in Africa with their families with 2 acres of land and still have enough land to feed the world. Tell me that isn't crazy. Tell me that isn't insane. And we are fighting over scraps. We are hating each other over pigmentation. Um, and we are always placing the blame on this person did this or this person took that. Think about that. Think about that. We can't get it together. And we cannot acknowledge the sins of our past. And as long as we continue to ignore the sins of the past without finding a way to heal, as long as there's no recognition and no foolproof plan to restore those that's been hurt from this country's past, we are going to keep running into the same issue. As long as there's people in power that want to keep us fighting each other, we are always going to have issues, and the young people are going to suffer. My clock is ticking faster than my children's clock. You understand what I'm saying? I have a limited time on this earth, and I'm going to try to enjoy it and make a change. So I'll be remiss not to speak out on these things. I hope you guys really follow me on this. But we have to stop thinking so much about ourselves that we're not planning for their future. And these people in power are only planning for today. They're not planning for generations to come. They will rather see us full of hate, bigotry, racism, greed, and corruption than to actually see us come together. Let's acknowledge the truths. Let's acknowledge the truths that are out there, the facts that are out there. Let's acknowledge the hurt and pain that this country has done to everyone at one point or another. And let's start to hear each other as opposed to being in this defense mode all the time. And maybe we'll get somewhere.